Good afternoon.
I don't see anybody nodding their head, but maybe that's right, maybe tomorrow. We've gone to the meeting up in the mountains. Go what? Have I torn it up already? I believe the battery may be good.
We're live. We're going to be talking tonight in James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. So if you have your Bible, you may want to be turning there. But it's going to be on the screen here in a minute too as well. Before we get started, Alan, would you offer a prayer for us? We've been, excuse me, my voice is, I guess it's dry weather, dry humidity, but we'll struggle through anyway. Back in the back, over here in the fellowship room, a few Sundays ago, several Sundays, we spent some time studying about God's will for us. And we know, we learned that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, we're supposed to rejoice always and be thankful for everything and pray without ceasing. We know that God wants us to be saved. 1 Timothy 3 verse 4, 2 verse 4, it says he wants all to be saved, to come to an understanding of the truth, knowledge of the truth. He wants us to serve others. Ephesians 2 verse 8, we're his created for good works. He created us for good works. He wants us to be separated from the world. He wants us to be holy. 1 Peter 1 verse 16. He wants us to be submissive. Submit to him and submit to his will in all things. And he wants us finally, and among other things, when we looked at it, he wants us to make good choices, to make good decisions in our life. We talked about that extensively, about decision making. He wants us to understand and to use whatever measure of wisdom that we were given. All this involves knowledge, but we know people who are really smart, know a lot of stuff, but unfortunately, they're not someone we consider to be a wise person. It's all important where we gain our knowledge from. And that's what I want to look at tonight, is wisdom. In James chapter 3, beginning of verse 13, he asks a question, he says, who is wise and understanding among you? And, if we ask that here, I figure most of us raise our hands because, we're doing our best to live a Christian life. And we're doing our best to understand and live by the precepts that God set forth to us in the Scriptures. So we would have to consider ourselves wise people. I don't think any of us would raise our hand if the Scripture had said, who among you is foolish? We don't consider ourselves to be foolish people. But there are foolish people out in the world, and unfortunately, everyone needs to come to an understanding of the truth. The second part of that verse, it says, who is wise and understanding? We covered that. Who is wise and understanding among you? The second phrase of that, it says, by his good conduct, let him show himself. I'm having trouble reading this, and I apologize. By his good conduct, let him show his works. I'm gonna get this fixed tomorrow in Birmingham. So, people can tell about us by how we act, by our conduct. If we see someone who is misbehaving, who's doing things that are unacceptable, we know by his conduct that we wouldn't call that a wise person. However, people in the world, there are many people in the world who think the more conniving they are and the more treacherous they are, the smarter they are. And then no doubt they're smart, but they don't have the kind of wisdom that they need. That's not what God's talking about there. Good conduct is a product of humility and meekness. It's an attitude that we have. Not only do we know what's right, but we have to show it's right. He goes on and he writes in the final part of that, in the meekness, we're to act in the meekness of wisdom. And meekness is a pretty, I don't want to say complex part of characteristic, but it's made up of a lot of different things. You know, we consider an humble person to be meek. We consider a person who is kind and thoughtful to other people to be meek. Someone wrote, described it as the quality of not being overly impressed with our own self-importance. There are many people out there who are impressed with how important they are. We know them. We see them. They really go out of their way to show us and tell us how important they are. You know, everybody's got a story. Whenever you meet someone, you start a conversation. If you listen, everybody's got a story. And you can listen to them, and if they're that self-important person, you can tell it right away because it's all about I and all about me. And that's a telltale fact of that. It takes a lot of concepts in to be a meek person. Gentleness, graciousness, mildness. I think the Greek compares it to a horse that's been tamed. It's strength, power, under control. You know, a horse is, when I was a kid, we had horses. And they were really dumb animals, I'll be honest with you. But you put that bit in his mouth, and that bit had a little piece of steel with a loop on it. You pull back on the reins, and it pressed on his tongue. And he would sooner or later learn what you wanted him to do. But a horse is a powerful animal, but yet he's under control. And that's what the early Greeks compared meekness to, is power under control. To rephrase it, we show our good conduct with an attitude of gentleness, humility, and meekness that comes from power under control. Anybody got any comments about that first verse? In verse 14 through 16, he talks about the wisdom of the world. It's a different kind of wisdom from what we need to have as Christians. It's what wrong wisdom looks like. It says, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. Jealousy and envy can eat us alive. We know people who are envious. We know people who are jealous of what someone else has. As Christians, we need to be happy for those who have things, who are successful. We need to be, if they've done it the right way and they've earned it as they should earn it, we need to be happy for them. We don't need to be envious of them. We don't need to be jealous of them. You know, we need to be thankful as they are thankful. We claim to be wise, but we're living in the opposite way when we're envious. And we're living foolishly, which is a fool is the opposite of a wise person. We live in the opposite way of meekness. Envy, jealousy, and selfishness comes from a sense of self-importance, looking out for our own interests before others. Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only for his own interests, but also for the interest of others. There are commercials on TV. And the ones that come to my mind are the trial lawyers that are advertising. And get the settlement, get the money that you deserve, you know. Get other ads will say, you know, this is what you deserve. This is what you're supposed to have. You know, really and truly, if you get right down to it, we don't deserve anything. But God has given these things to us. A wise person recognizes that. You don't gain things unless God gives them to us the right way. We don't gain them the right way unless God makes it available to us. Any comments about that? In verse 15, it says, "This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic." Worldly wisdom is earthy, earth-like. The wisdom of the world around us is what he's talking about. You know, if we watch television, we watch whatever, and we see how other people act. We know how other people act. They think they know what they're doing, but they're wrong. They're acting in the wrong way. So that's an earthy wisdom. Unspiritual, we see it all the time. You know, people how many people do we know don't have any association with any religion? You know, they don't know how to act in a spiritual way. We've all got friends that don't know how to act in a spiritual manner. That's one of the characteristics of that's not wisdom from above. It's demonic, is what James called it. Godly wisdom is not the wisdom of the world. Boy, we're going to get through this thing here in a few minutes. Y'all just hang on. Verse 16 shows the result of worldly wisdom. It says, "For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice." What he's saying is the results of disorder and vile, what he's talking about the results of vile behavior and disorder in the world. We've got crime increasing. Immorality is becoming a way of life. There's a lack of discipline. Everywhere we go, there's disorder. You know, God is the author of all order. If you think about it, he created the universe, put everything in its place. It's working just perfectly. He created that. He set down in the scriptures the rules for us to live by. If we live by those rules, we're living an orderly life. Everything is working out as it should work out in a spiritual sense. God created order, and he expects us to live orderly. He doesn't expect us to live like he's talking about in this worldly type of wisdom. We know people that are doing a terrible job of managing their lives. We know people who have families that they're a mess. You look at the world around us, and it's a mess. You know, I think when we teach our children, and when we teach them whatever as they grow up, the object of that is to get them in a position to manage their lives. And there are a lot of people out there who really do a terrible job at that. You know, financially, behaviorally, religiously, just on and on and on. Just make a mess of it. Any comments? Verse 17, he says, "But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere." He sort of grouped this stuff into various characteristics here. First, he said pure. You know, a person with wisdom is leading a pure life. When God brought the people out of Egypt. And he showed them the promised land. And he sent them, gave them the law of Moses to live by. One of the rules they were to live by was not associate with the people in the land, people that were already there. He didn't want to associate with them, certainly didn't want to marry them. It's just, he forbid all that. The reason was he wanted them to be separated from that. And the definition, a simple definition of being holy, 1 Peter 1 verse 16 says God is holy and he wants us to be holy. He wants us to be separated from all this stuff around us, to live a life not like a monk, like we see on TV, these people, various religions, and just live in exile nearly. But that's not what he's talking about. But he wants us to be spiritually separated from all the hubris and all the debris that's around us that can attract us and pull us away. He wants us to be separated from that and be dedicated to him. And that's what it means to lead a pure life. We're not going to go around dressing differently from anyone else. We're going to eat the same foods. We're going to associate with other people. But as far as managing our lives, we're going to separate from the habits of the world and try to do the best we can. The second things that he mentions there is being peaceable, gentle, and open to reason. He's talking about controlling our dispositions. What kind of disposition do we have? We have to interact with people every day. Some of them may be difficult to deal with, but there's a correct way of dealing with them. We need to deal with them in a peaceful manner, or we need to deal with them in a gentle manner, and we need to deal with them as best we can, and being open to reason. Paul, throughout his travels, when he would go to a new area and meet with people there at the tabernacle, or where usually at the tabernacle. When he went to Athens, he met with the people of Athens. But the first thing he tried to do was reason with them. Of course, he didn't compromise. But that's what we need to do. We need to be reasonable people. We need to be able to reason with people. We ought to be able to talk to someone and not get in an argument about anything. We need to be that way. I remember going, I've said this back in fellowship room several times, and it just sort of stuck with me. I was in a guy's office one time, and he had a poster on the wall and had two big white-faced bulls, and they were head to head. And the caption said, "Please forgive those who fail to see things my way." So that's an example of being unreasonable. That's always stuck with me. Any comments? Thirdly, he mentioned being full of mercy and good fruits. He's sort of describing a wise person's way of doing things, his actions. If we spend some time thinking about helping others, doing a good work, sending a card to somebody, things like that. That's sort of what he's talking about there. We need to be merciful people. People are going to offend us. They're going to hurt our feelings, overlook us, exclude us. But we need to be merciful to them. And sometimes that's very difficult. Very difficult for young people. But it's something we can continue learning to do, is being merciful people. It's the opposite of what he said in James chapter 1, verse 8. He was talking about double-mindedness. And he said a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He's talking about being impartial and sincere. And more likely, what he's talking about in New American Standard Version, it says it's unwavering and without hypocrisy. A wise person, steady and constant, and steadfast. The Bible talks about being steadfastness. A wise person practices steadfastness. Finally, in verse 18, it says, "And the harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." James 1 verse 20 says, The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. We have to be careful where we place our anger. Righteous indignation is one thing, but anger out of control is something else. And a wise person doesn't do that. Christ showed righteous indignation at times too. And I think we need to do that occasionally. But we need to be careful with it. Keep a lid on it. Any comments or questions? I appreciate your attention. We don't have any fans. Eddie wasn't here. Turn the air on. It's sort of warm in here, but I appreciate your attention. Eddie will be back Sunday, and we'll all be relieved. Thank you.